Get out of my room, Felix. The door slammed so hard that the framed photograph on Hyunjin's wall rattled against the plaster. Felix froze. For several seconds, neither of them moved. The room smelled faintly of rain, fabric softener, and the cold coffee Hyunjin had forgotten beside his desk. Outside the window, Seoul glowed beneath a restless storm, neon signs bleeding through sheets of water. Thunder rolled somewhere beyond the buildings, but inside the room the silence felt louder. Hyunjin stood beside his desk, chest rising sharply, his hands clenched at his sides. Felix stared at him. He had seen Hyunjin angry before. He had seen him frustrated, exhausted, annoyed, even hurt, but never like this. Hyunjin, I said, get out. Swallowed. I only came because you weren't answering. I don't need you checking on me every 5 minutes. I wasn't checking on you every 5 minutes. You always do this. Hyunjin's voice cracked. That single crack changed something in Felix's expression. He took one slow step forward. You're upset. I'm fine. Not. Stop. Stopped. Hyunjin turned away, staring at the rain-streaked window. His reflection looked unfamiliar. His jaw was tight. His eyes were red from lack of sleep. There was a thin white envelope sitting half-hidden beneath a sketchbook on his desk. Felix noticed it. Hyunjin noticed Felix noticing it. Don't. Looked back at him. Don't what? Don't ask. I wasn't going to. You were. A bitter laugh escaped Hyunjin. You always ask. Lowered his gaze. Because you never tell me anything. The words hung between them. Hyunjin's shoulders stiffened. For the past 3 weeks something had been changing. At first Felix had blamed exhaustion, then schedules, then rehearsals, then the endless pressure that seemed to follow them everywhere. But Hyunjin had started disappearing after practice. He stopped eating with the others. He kept his phone face down. He avoided Felix's eyes whenever their conversations became too personal, and every night he locked his bedroom door. Tonight Felix had finally stopped pretending not to notice. I heard you arguing with someone earlier, Felix said quietly. Hyunjin didn't answer. Who was it? No one. Hyunjin. I said no one. Looked at the envelope again. There was a name written across it. His name. Felix's breath caught. What is that? Hyunjin immediately grabbed the envelope. Nothing. That has my name on it. It's nothing. Then why does it have my name? Hyunjin stepped between Felix and the desk. Because I told you to leave. Stared at him. Are you hiding something from me? Hyunjin's eyes flashed. Maybe I am. Answer hurt more than Felix expected. He looked away. K. Hyunjin's anger suddenly seemed to falter. Felix walked toward the door, his fingers closed around the handle. For 1 second Hyunjin almost called his name, almost, but pride won. The door opened. Felix stepped into the hallway, then he stopped. Without turning around, he whispered, You didn't have to hurt me just to make me leave. Door closed softly. Hyunjin remained motionless. The anger disappeared from his face. He looked at the closed door, then at the envelope. His breathing became uneven. Damn it. Sank into his chair and pressed both hands against his face. He hadn't wanted to yell. He hadn't wanted Felix to see the envelope. He hadn't wanted anyone to know. Especially Felix, because the truth inside that envelope wasn't about Hyunjin, it was about Felix. And 5 minutes later Hyunjin was already running through the hallway after him. Felix. There was no answer. Hyunjin reached the elevator just as the doors closed. He slapped the button. Felix. The elevator disappeared downward. Hyunjin stood there, breathing hard. His phone vibrated. One message, unknown number. You should have told him the truth before he found out himself. Hyunjin's blood ran cold. Another message arrived. Now it's too late. He stared at the screen. For the first time that night his anger was replaced completely by fear. He turned toward the staircase. Felix. He ran. The next morning Felix woke before his alarm. He had barely slept. The memory of Hyunjin's voice kept replaying inside his head. Get out of my room. He stared at the ceiling. Maybe he had crossed a line. Maybe Hyunjin genuinely needed space. But the image of the envelope refused to disappear. Why would Hyunjin have a letter with his name on it? Felix eventually got out of bed and headed toward the kitchen. The others were already preparing for the day. Hyunjin wasn't there. Felix tried not to care. He failed. Where's Hyunjin? He asked casually. No one answered immediately. Then one of the members said, He left early. Felix's stomach tightened. Where? He didn't say. Nodded. He poured water into a glass. His hand trembled slightly. Nobody noticed. Or at least he hoped nobody did. Across the city, Hyunjin sat alone inside a parked car. The envelope rested on the passenger seat. He had spent the entire night thinking about whether to open it. Now he finally did. Inside was a photograph. Felix stood in front of an old building. Beside him was a man Hyunjin had never seen before. On the back of the photograph was a handwritten sentence. He doesn't remember what happened here. Hyunjin stared at it, then another photograph fell from the envelope. This one showed Felix much younger. He was standing outside the same building. Hyunjin's fingers tightened around the photograph. There was something else inside, a small piece of paper, 3 words, ask him about the night he disappeared. Hyunjin's heart began pounding. He knew Felix had never talked about that part of his past, not because Felix didn't want to, because something had happened that he couldn't remember. Hyunjin suddenly understood why someone had been following him, why the anonymous messages had started, why the envelope had appeared in his room. Someone wasn't threatening Hyunjin, they were using him to reach Felix. And Hyunjin had just pushed away the one person he had been trying to protect. That evening, Felix returned to the dorm alone. He found Hyunjin waiting outside his bedroom. Neither spoke. Hyunjin looked exhausted, Felix looked hurt. "I owe you an apology," Hyunjin said. Felix folded his arms. "You do? I shouldn't have shouted." "No, I was scared." Felix's expression softened slightly. "Of what?" Hyunjin looked at him. "Of losing you." Stopped breathing for a moment, Hyunjin continued before he could answer. "There are things I didn't tell you because I thought keeping you away from them would keep you safe." Felix's eyes narrowed. "What things?" Hyunjin pulled the envelope from his jacket. Felix stared at it. "I think someone has been watching you." Hallway suddenly felt colder. "Why? Because of something that happened before we met." Shook his head. "I don't understand." "I know." Hyunjin held out the envelope. "I think you deserve to see this." Reached for it. Before his fingers touched the paper, every light in the hallway went out. Darkness swallowed them. A second later, Felix heard Hyunjin's phone hit the floor. Then came a sound from the stairwell, a slow creak. Someone was coming upstairs. Hyunjin grabbed Felix's wrist. "Don't move." Footsteps stopped outside the door. Neither of them breathed. Then someone whispered from the darkness. "Felix." His blood ran cold. The voice sounded familiar, too familiar. Felix slowly turned toward Hyunjin. "Who is that?" Hyunjin didn't answer because he recognized the voice, and he knew exactly who had come back. The light suddenly returned. The hallway was empty. Only the envelope remained on the floor. Felix picked it up. Inside, beneath the photographs, was a final note. "You have been looking for the wrong person." Felix stared at the words. Hyunjin stood beside him silent. "What does it mean?" Felix asked. Hyunjin looked toward the staircase. "I don't know." His expression said otherwise. Felix noticed. "You do know something." Hyunjin closed his eyes. "I know enough to be afraid." Stepped closer. "Then don't protect me anymore." Hyunjin opened his eyes. Felix's voice trembled. "Tell me everything." For several seconds, Hyunjin said nothing, then he nodded. And for the first time in years, he began telling Felix the truth. He told him about the mysterious photographs, about the messages, about the old building, about the night Felix had disappeared from everyone's sight years earlier. And finally, he told him the one thing he had been most afraid to say. "I was there that night." Stared at him. "What?" "I was there." The room seemed to tilt. "You knew me, not like this." Stepped backward. "Hyunjin, I didn't know it was you." "Happened." Hyunjin looked down. "I found you alone outside that building." Felix's face went pale. "You were crying," Hyunjin whispered. "You kept saying you couldn't remember where you lived." Felix's eyes filled with confusion. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you were terrified." "You remembered all this?" "Yes." "Then why did you pretend you didn't know?" Hyunjin's eyes filled with tears. "Because someone told me that if I ever told you, you would disappear again." Couldn't speak. The silence between them was no longer angry, it was heavier, filled with years of missing pieces, forgotten memories and fear. Felix finally whispered, "Who told you?" Hyunjin looked toward the window. "I never found out." A long silence followed, then Felix reached for his hand. Hyunjin looked down at their fingers. "I thought you hated me," Felix whispered. "I could never hate you." "Then why did you tell me to get out?" "Because I was terrified you would get hurt." Squeezed his hand. "You hurt me anyway." Hyunjin lowered his head. "I know." Moved closer. "You came after me." "I should have done it sooner." Outside, rain began falling again. This time, neither of them looked away. The mystery surrounding Felix's past was still unsolved. The person behind the messages was still somewhere outside. The old building still held memories Felix couldn't recover. But Hyunjin no longer intended to face it alone. And Felix no longer wanted Hyunjin to carry the fear by himself. That night, they sat beside the window until dawn. They didn't solve everything. They didn't suddenly become fearless. But something changed. Hyunjin finally understood that protecting someone didn't mean shutting them out. And Felix finally understood that sometimes anger was only fear wearing a louder voice. Before sunrise, Felix looked at Hyunjin. "Next time you're scared," Hyunjin glanced at him. "Tell me to get out." A faint smile appeared on Hyunjin's face. "I won't." Leaned back against the wall. "Good." For a moment everything was quiet, then Hyunjin's phone vibrated. Neither of them moved. The screen lit up. Unknown number. A single photograph had been sent. Felix looked at it. Hyunjin looked at it. The photograph showed the same old building. But this time there were two people standing outside. One was Felix, the other was Hyunjin, taken yesterday. Hyunjin slowly lowered the phone. Felix stared at him. They were watching us. Hyunjin nodded. Felix took a breath. Then we faced them together. Hyunjin looked at him for a long moment. Together. The rain continued outside. Neither of them knew what would happen next. But for the first time, neither of them was running away. The photograph remained on the screen between them, glowing faintly in the darkness. Felix stared at the image until his eyes began to sting. It had been taken yesterday, not weeks ago, not years ago. Yesterday, the angle of the photograph made his stomach twist. The old building stood behind them, its windows black and empty, while he and Hyunjin stood several meters apart on the sidewalk. Neither of them remembered being there together. "I don't understand," Felix whispered. Hyunjin took the phone from his hand. "We need to find out where this was taken." Nodded. Hyunjin zoomed in on the photograph. There was something reflected in one of the building's windows. A car, black, parked across the street. Hyunjin's expression changed. "What? I've seen that car before." Leaned closer. "Where?" "Outside the studio." The room suddenly felt colder. "Many times." Hyunjin didn't answer immediately. "Too many." Looked toward the window. The rain had become heavier. Every passing headlight briefly illuminated the room, casting strange shadows across the walls. "Maybe we should tell someone." Hyunjin shook his head. "Not yet. We don't know who we can trust." Felix frowned. "That sounds paranoid." "I know." Hyunjin placed the phone on the table. "But someone knew about your past before you did." Looked down. A strange pressure had begun forming behind his eyes. Fragments were returning. A narrow hallway, a metallic door, rain, someone shouting his name, then darkness. Felix pressed his fingers against his temple. "Felix, I remember something." Hyunjin immediately moved closer. "What? A door? What kind of door?" "Metal." Closed his eyes. I was standing in front of it. Breathing became faster. There was someone behind me. Hyunjin gently held his shoulder. "Don't force yourself." "I heard someone say." Stopped. Opened his eyes. "I heard someone say you weren't supposed to bring him here." Hyunjin froze. Those words were familiar, too familiar. He had heard them before, not recently, years ago, the night he had found Felix. Hyunjin's face lost its color. Looked at him. "You know that sentence." Hyunjin couldn't lie anymore. "Yes." "Where did you hear it?" "That night." Felix's heartbeat accelerated. "What happened after that?" Hyunjin looked away. "I don't remember everything." "You remember enough." Hyunjin swallowed. "I remember someone running away." "Who?" "I couldn't see their face." Stepped closer. "What else?" Hyunjin hesitated. "They left something behind." "Key." Stared at him. "Do you still have it?" Hyunjin slowly nodded. He walked toward his closet. From the bottom drawer beneath old clothes and notebooks, he pulled out a small metal box. Felix watched as he unlocked it. Inside was a single silver key. Felix's breath caught. He recognized it. "I've seen that before." Hyunjin looked up. "My dreams." Neither of them spoke. Felix reached toward the key but stopped before touching it. His fingers trembled. "I remember a room." Hyunjin's voice softened. "What room?" "A room with no windows." Closed his eyes. There was a chair. His breathing became uneven. "And a clock." Hyunjin's eyes widened. "What kind of clock?" "Old." "It broken?" Felix opened his eyes. "Yes." Hyunjin stepped backward. "That can't be." "Saw that clock." "When?" "The night I found you." Stared at him. "The building." Filled the room. Suddenly a loud knock came from the front door. Both of them froze. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate. Felix looked at Hyunjin. "Were you expecting someone?" "No." 3 knocks. Hyunjin motioned for Felix to stay behind him. He approached the door quietly. His hand hovered over the handle, then his phone vibrated. Unknown number. Hyunjin looked at the screen. "Don't open the door." His blood ran cold. He looked through the peephole. Nobody was standing outside. He slowly opened the door. The hallway was empty. Only a small black envelope lay on the floor. Hyunjin picked it up. His hands were shaking. Felix stepped closer. "What is it?" Hyunjin opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph. Felix stared at it. It showed the old building. But unlike the previous photographs, this one was taken from inside. A figure stood near the broken clock. The face was blurred. On the back were 4 words, "You were never alone." Felix's chest tightened, then something inside him snapped into place. The clock, the chair, the metal door, the voice, and suddenly he remembered another face, not clearly, only the shape, the eyes, the familiar smile. Felix dropped the photograph. Hyunjin caught his arm. "Felix." Felix looked at him with terror in his eyes. "I know who it was." Hyunjin's voice became barely audible. "Who?" Felix stared toward the dark hallway. "It was someone we both know."
Felix's fingers tightened around Hyunjin's sleeve. "It was someone we both know." Hyunjin stared at him. "Who?" Felix opened his mouth, but no answer came. The memory was there, painfully close, yet every time he reached for it, it dissolved into darkness. "I can't see the face," he whispered. "But I remember the voice." "What did they say?" Felix closed his eyes. The room disappeared. For a moment, he was somewhere else. cold concrete beneath his palms, the smell of dust and rain, a flickering fluorescent light. A clock ticking despite its frozen hands, and a voice behind him. "You shouldn't have come here." Felix's eyes snapped open. Hyunjin caught him before he could stumble. "Remember the room? Tell me. Was someone behind me? Who? I don't know." Guided him toward the sofa. Felix sat down, breathing heavily. "The person knew my name." Hyunjin crouched in front of him. "Did they hurt you?" Felix shook his head. "They threaten you?" "I don't remember." Hyunjin looked at the photographs scattered across the table. Something about them felt wrong, not because of what they showed. Because of what they didn't show. Every photograph had been taken from a distance. Every photograph showed Felix. And in every photograph there was something hidden somewhere in the background. A car, a reflection, a shadow, a window, a person standing too far away to identify. Hyunjin suddenly picked up the newest photograph. "Wait." Looked at him. Hyunjin pointed toward the corner. There. A tiny reflection appeared in a glass window. Someone was holding a camera, but the person's face was partially visible. Felix leaned closer. His breathing stopped. "I know that jacket." Hyunjin looked at him. "Whose?" Felix's eyes widened. Bang Chan's. Silence. Neither of them moved. Felix immediately shook his head. "No." Hyunjin stared at the photograph. "It could be someone wearing the same jacket." "Exactly. You don't believe it's him?" "I don't want to." Hyunjin sat beside him. "Then we don't accuse anyone until we know." Nodded. But the doubt had already entered his mind. And once doubt entered, it became almost impossible to remove. The next day, everything felt normal. That was what made it frightening. People laughed, music played through the rehearsal room, staff moved around with clipboards, cameras followed them. Felix smiled when he was supposed to. Hyunjin smiled too. But neither of them mentioned the photographs, neither mentioned the key, neither mentioned the old building. And neither mentioned Bang Chan. During rehearsal, Felix noticed something. Bang Chan was watching him, not constantly, just occasionally, a glance, a pause, then another glance. Felix tried to convince himself it meant nothing. But when rehearsal ended, Bang Chan approached him. "Are you okay?" Felix forced a smile. "Yeah." Bang Chan studied his face. "You look tired." "I didn't sleep much." "Everything all right with Hyunjin?" Felix's smile disappeared for half a second. Bang Chan noticed. "Happened?" "Nothing." "You sure?" Felix nodded. "Yeah." Bang Chan smiled faintly. "Okay." Walked away. Felix watched him. Hyunjin appeared beside him. "You noticed it too?" Felix looked at him. He knew something was wrong. Hyunjin's expression tightened. "Did he ask about me?" "Yes." "Exactly what did he say?" Felix repeated the conversation. Hyunjin remained silent, then he looked toward Bang Chan. "He's hiding something." Felix's stomach sank. That evening, Hyunjin returned to the old building alone. He didn't tell Felix. He didn't tell anyone. The building looked even worse in person. Broken windows, peeling walls, wet concrete, a rusted metal door. Hyunjin took the silver key from his pocket. He stood before the door. For years, he had wondered whether the key would still work. He inserted it, the lock clicked, the door opened. A cold smell rushed toward him, dust, mold, rainwater, and something else, something metallic. Hyunjin turned on his flashlight. The hallway looked exactly as he remembered. At the end stood the broken clock. Its hands were frozen. 2:17. Hyunjin's breathing became shallow. He walked toward it, then he saw the chair exactly where he remembered. And beside the chair was a small wooden box. Hyunjin approached slowly. Inside the box was an old recording device. His hands trembled as he picked it up. There was only one file. He pressed play. Static filled the hallway, then a young voice spoke. "Hyunjin." He froze. It was his own voice, a recording from years ago. "You need to listen carefully." Hyunjin stared at the device. The recording continued. "If Felix ever remembers this place, don't let him come back alone." A second voice appeared. Felix, younger, frightened. "Are you helping me?" Hyunjin's heart pounded. His younger voice answered, "Because I promised." The recording stopped. Hyunjin stood completely still. He couldn't remember making that promise. Then another sound came from behind him, a footstep. He turned. The hallway was empty. Another footstep, closer. Hyunjin raised his flashlight. Nothing. Then his phone vibrated. A message appeared. "You finally remembered." Hyunjin's blood turned cold. A second message arrived. "But you still don't remember who made the promise." He slowly lowered his phone. Behind him, the broken clock began ticking. Once, twice, 3 times, the frozen hands moved. 2:18. Hyunjin stared at it in disbelief. Then he heard a voice whisper directly behind him. "You were never supposed to remember." Hyunjin turned sharply. The flashlight fell from his hand. The beam spun across the floor. For one brief second, a shadow crossed the wall. Then everything went dark. Hyunjin's hand searched blindly across the concrete floor until his fingers found the flashlight. He grabbed it and turned it on. The hallway was empty. Only the broken clock remained. Its hands were still pointing at 2:18. Hyunjin stood slowly, forcing himself to breathe. He wanted to believe the voice had been part of his imagination. Fear could distort memories. Exhaustion could create sounds that weren't there, but the recording in his hand was real. His younger voice was real, and the promise he had forgotten was real. He played the recording again, static, his younger voice. If Felix ever remembers this place, don't let him come back alone. Then Felix's younger voice. Why are you helping me? And his own answer. Because I promised. Hyunjin closed his eyes. A memory suddenly surfaced. Not from the night he found Felix, from the morning after. He remembered sitting in a hospital corridor. His clothes were wet. His hands were shaking. Someone had placed a blanket around his shoulders. A doctor stood in front of him. Does the boy have anyone we can contact? Hyunjin had looked through the glass at Felix sleeping inside the room. Then he had said something. He doesn't remember anything. The doctor had nodded. Then let him forget. Hyunjin's eyes opened. He finally remembered why he had stayed silent. He hadn't been protecting Felix from the person who had brought him there. He had been protecting Felix from the truth about himself. Hyunjin rushed out of the building. He drove back to the dorm through heavy rain. When he opened the door, Felix was waiting. You went somewhere. Hyunjin stopped. Felix stood beside the kitchen counter, arms crossed. I called you 6 times. My phone was silent. You went to the building, didn't you? Hyunjin didn't answer. Felix's expression hardened. You promised me you wouldn't hide things anymore. I know. Then tell me. Hyunjin placed the recording device on the table. I found this. Stared at it. What is it? A recording from the night we met. Went completely still. Hyunjin pressed play. The voices filled the room. Felix listened without blinking. When his younger voice asked why Hyunjin was helping him, something changed in his face. He looked at Hyunjin. I knew you. Yes, before we became friends. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because you weren't ready. Would you know? Because I saw what happened to you. Felix's voice trembled. What happened? Hyunjin sat down. You were being followed. Whom? I don't know. Then what were you doing there? I followed you. Stared at him. You followed me? Yes. Why? Hyunjin looked down at his hands. Because someone had been sending me messages about you. Felix's eyes widened. What kind of messages? They said you were in danger. Who sent them? I never found out. Slowly sat opposite him. Then why did you promise to protect me? Hyunjin looked at him. That night you were terrified. Swallowed. You kept asking me not to leave. Felix's eyes filled with tears. I don't remember. I know. You stayed. Yes. Until morning. Yes. Looked down. A faint memory stirred inside him. Someone sitting beside him, a hand covering his. A quiet voice saying everything would be okay. He looked at Hyunjin. It was you. Hyunjin nodded. Felix's eyes filled completely. You were the one holding my hand. Yes. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Felix stood and walked toward the window. I spent years thinking nobody was there. Hyunjin followed him. You weren't alone. Wiped his eyes. You disappeared. I didn't want to. Then why? Because your family asked me to stay away. Turned. Family, Hyunjin nodded. They were afraid remembering everything would make things worse. Stared at him. Did they know who was following me? I think they did. The room became silent. Felix looked toward the photographs on the table. Then this isn't just about us. No, it's about my past. Yes. Someone doesn't want me to remember. Hyunjin nodded. Felix took a deep breath. Then I want to remember. Hyunjin looked at him. Even if it hurts. Especially if it hurts. Hyunjin reached for his hand. Felix didn't pull away. I was angry at you, Felix whispered. I know. I thought you didn't trust me. I trusted you more than anyone. Then why did you shut me out? Because I was afraid that if I told you the truth, I'd lose you. Looked into his eyes. You almost lost me anyway. Hyunjin's eyes lowered. I know. Squeezed his hand. You came back. Hyunjin looked up. And this time, Felix continued, we face it together. The following morning, they contacted someone they had avoided involving for years, Bang Chan. He arrived at the dorm before noon. The moment he entered the room, his expression changed when he saw the photographs. You found them. Stared at him. You knew. Bang Chan didn't answer immediately. Hyunjin stepped forward. Tell us everything. Bang Chan sighed. I knew something had happened years ago. Why didn't you tell me? Felix asked. Because I was asked not to. By my family. Yes. Looked away. Did you know Hyunjin was there? Bang Chan nodded. I found out later. Hyunjin's jaw tightened. The messages, Bang Chan shook his head. Those weren't from me. Looked at the photograph. Then who took this? Bang Chan examined it carefully. I don't know. He turned the photograph over. His expression changed. What? Bang Chan pointed at the corner. A tiny symbol had been drawn there, 3 intersecting lines. Hyunjin recognized it. That's what it means. Looked between them. What? Bang Chan hesitated. It was used by someone who worked at the building. Who? Bang Chan looked at Felix. Someone who disappeared shortly after you did. Felix's heart began racing. Who? Bang Chan placed the photograph on the table. Your older brother's former manager. Froze. I don't have a brother's manager. Bang Chan looked confused. You don't remember? Felix slowly shook his head. No. Bang Chan stared at him. Then his face changed. Felix, think we finally understand why your memories were erased. Looked at Hyunjin. Hyunjin took his hand. Neither of them spoke. Outside, the rain had stopped. For the first time, sunlight entered the room. But the truth waiting inside Felix's forgotten past was darker than either of them had imagined.